What's up,
Hi.
everybody? How are we all doing? Welcome to a brand new Demystifying Post-Production Month. And I'm joined with the amazing Ian Robinson, Darren, and Noseman. How's it going, guys?
Hi. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Happy Monday to everyone. And hello to everyone in the chat. We are inundated with good mornings and hellos from all of you. So I'm going to run through a few because I feel like it's been a while since I've introed Demystifying. So hello to Sharon, JM Ricks, Irene, Sean, Voyant Pictures, Zoltan, Jason, Lord Luigi Rig. We got a Lord with us. Hello, lovely Rodrigo, and Hannah and Critical Fusion and everyone else that said hello. It's good to be with you all, and of course, good to be with the three of you guys.
Yes.
So before we get into the amazing UVing stuff, I thought I'd quickly just talk about the events that we have going on. So if I just share my screen quick, I can show you on the maxon.net events page, which is this page here. Here is where you can see all the events we have going on, including live events. So we're currently in the middle of SIGGRAPH. And I believe, Ian, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong. Is this being streamed across the Maxon channels at all? Can people see what's
I
going
don't
on?
know. I actually don't know if SIGGRAPH will be streamed this year, but I will be
Okay.
there. So if you're there, stop by, say hi. Get some
Yes.
high
And if
fives, some
not,
hugs.
I feel like they always get recorded anyway. So if it's not streamed, then at some point the presentations will be available for everyone to see on YouTube.
Exactly.
Do we get a little teaser about what you're talking about? A little teaser for us?
Do people like grotesques or gargoyles?
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Random fun fact if you didn't know. What we know as gargoyles were originally called grotesques at some point. A gargoyle was actually for like draining waters off the water spillover off the side of a castle. Grotesque is what we now call a gargoyle. It's really fascinating. So you'll learn stuff like that in my session.
History and 3D. What more could you want?
Exactly.
Cool. Yes. So just to run through a few of the sessions that we have, of course, we have our Demystifying Post-Production UV workflows, which kicks off today. And then on Thursday, we're going to be doing a recap with the amazing Deborah Wright, who just ran through how she creates her sculpting for stage and screen inside of ZBrush. So we'll be having her answering some of your questions, which will be cool. And as always, we have the amazing Hashi and Seth on VFX and Chill on Fridays. But feel free to check out the events page and you can see all the great stuff we have going on. And if you ever miss any of our sessions, then don't worry, because pretty much everything gets recorded. And Dr. Sassy, the amazing Dr. Sassy, always does the timestamps for us. And so you can head over to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. As you can see at the top, we've got all the upcoming live streams. So Demystifying, Ask the Trainer, Maxon Color, as well as quick tips, videos on all of the Maxon tools. Speaking of all of the Maxon tools, if you do want to ever learn something new or kind of get started with different tools, for example, Cinema 4D, Redshift, Universe, ZBrush, all of the products, then head over to the beautiful new, I mean, it's not necessarily new anymore, but new-ish looking Cineversity. And yeah, follow along with one of the Getting Started series. And then finally, before we get into what we're going to be talking about today, we'd like to say thank you to you all for being part of our amazing community by giving away free t-shirts. All you have to do is pay for shipping. So all the links to all the stuff I'm talking about now, including the link to the merch store and that super secret password, you can now find in the chat. So yeah, grab yourselves a t-shirt and then you can represent just like we do. Okay, so UV workflows. So this is something like, and I'm sure the guys will agree, this is probably something I get asked about quite a lot. We always get asked, can we do a series on UVing, whether it's intro, whether it's advanced? People want to know about this stuff. And so we did a little questionnaire and people came back with all of the things that they would like to see across our socials. And we wrote the list down and we all had a discussion and said, okay, what shall we do? And so we thought we'd break it down into 4 different weeks. Week 1 is going to be a nice ease-in introduction to what UVing is. And so Noseman is going to be taking us through a lot of great knowledge, as he always does. And also, I did want to talk about well, I don't know if you want to talk about this, Noseman, while we're sort of talking about UVing and getting into it.
I'm just going to shame everyone that's hasn't subscribed and turned on their notifications and commented on my YouTube channel. So YouTube /Noseman should be me, or you can just get that link and paste it in there. The other thing I want to say is that I have done, so that particular episode you're seeing on Ellie's screen is a 2.5-hour live I did on UVs, addressing people's questions and going on general UV rants, which I love to do. And I'm going to try and replicate part of that today. And if you go to the old Cineversity, cineversity.com, you will find that, let me share my screen, one sec. Boom, I'm taking over the screen here. So just go to cineversity.com, log in, and what you can do is you can type here in the help, UV, so U and V, press enter. And then on the left, it's going to say instructor. Of course, you can watch all the instructors, but if you click on this beautiful name, Athanasios Posantzis, Athanasios means immortal, you will get all my UV-related tutorials over here, spanning the last few years. So I'm pretty sure you're going to pick up some information from there. But today we're going to, recap on some of these things and try and get some information out there for... I love UVs, by the way. It's a technical thing, and it's fun, and it's got for some very simple principles as well.
It's sort of relaxing.
It's relaxing. Yeah. Nice one.
I think so.
I agree. I find them relaxing myself. Yeah.
So, are we ready?
We are. Don't forget as well to fill this chat with your questions. As we all know, Noseman loves problem solving and answering your questions live. So inundate him.
Worst case scenario, I won't reply. There have been some questions. I've got the list in front of me that Ellie has posted. I'm going to talk about some of these things. What I want to start with is the very, very basic thing. What are UVs? Now, most of us know something about UVs, or may even know exactly how UVs work. But I believe there's a way of seeing UVs from a different perspective that will allow you to understand how to solve the problems. And this begins in Photoshop. And not this, but we're going to start with the globe. So to understand UVs as a general subject, the most common thing we ever see that has a similar, let's say, approach is how do we present a map of the Earth, which is spherical, and present it in a flat configuration. And most times what you would see as the representation of the Earth is this. This is an equirectangular map of the globe. So it's a flattened version of a spherical object. The problem with this is that, and it's very obvious when you look at Greenland, that the island of Greenland, which looks massive, right? It looks as big as Canada, which is the second biggest country on the planet, is actually this small. And what happens with these kind of maps is that you have no distortion at the equator. You have a maximum distortion at the poles. I mean, the Antarctica isn't, if you take this and say, oh, the area of Antarctica is bigger than Africa and South America combined. No, Antarctica is about this big. So the problems we are presented with when we want to take the globe and map it on a flat surface is what we see here is distortion. I'm going to talk about the two limits of UVs. Now, what have people done in order, and I think I have a map here that shows, these are all sorts of different types of projections, like this one, or this one here. And the question is, what have map creators done over the ages to mitigate the problem of distortion? Well, they use different kinds of maps. And what this represents is if you take a spherical map of the Earth, a globe, and then start cutting along these lines, potentially you'll reach a point where you can unfold the Earth in such a way where at least the land masses are not very distorted. And right at this point, I need to set the two limits of UVs. Now, this is all theoretical, but it does map 100% with what the challenge with UVs is. And let me go in Cinema 4D and see if we can do something here. So I have a flat plane. And this flat plane, because it's flat, I can map any flat image to this. Because UVs is nothing more, the whole concept behind using UVs to apply textures to 3D objects is finding a way to tell the software how to flatten any 3D object in order for us to put that flat image on that, let's say, flattened object, which is essentially the UV unwrapping we've done. And then the model itself gets wrapped, and we see a 3D model with that flat texture on top of it. Now, if I take this plane here, and I'm just going to rotate it in this direction 90 degrees and in that direction 90 degrees. And let me just bend this, okay? Now, if I have an object that bends in one axis, like this one here, when we decide to unfold it, we shouldn't have any problem. I think I have my 90 degrees off. There you go. We shouldn't have any problem. It's just like rolling a map into a roll or a carpet. You can roll a carpet and everything is fine. So when we have objects that have one axis of, let's say, 3D distortion, rotations and all that, like this one, mapping it, it's not a problem. You won't have any problem doing that. The problems begin when our objects have two axes of rotation, when we have objects which are not watertight. So take, for example, this has folds in multiple directions. If I rotate it 90 degrees here, and where's my 90 degrees? Here it is, 0 here. Let's move it up a bit or down a bit. There we go. So now we have an object that has a, let's say, rotation, a bend in two axes, this way and that way. Well, this object here, forget about the two deformers. This object here cannot be unwrapped either having distortion, without distortion, or without any cuts, any seams. And the two limits of UV unwrapping, the two sides of the problem where all the solutions lie in between, are how can we unwrap an object with the minimum number of cuts, seams, and the minimum amount of distortion. And depending on what you're doing, you will always compensate one for the other. And the globe becomes that sort of, let's say, the what we need to do. I think I have, oh, I don't have that one, but I do have, and I'm going to bring it up for a second. I had all my tabs here, and then I lost all my tabs. My tabs.
All the tabs are gone.
All
We
the
do have
tabs
a
are-
question while you pull that up, which
Yep.
is,
Please.
what does UV stand for? And we're not talking about ultraviolet rays.
Yep, I'm going to show you exactly. So if you type in your browser, go to google.com, and let's search for images. And let's type globe, not globe and mail, but globe. Let's go images or globe map. Let's see, globe map. And projections, globe map projections. You will get ideas. It seems funny, but you will get ideas about how people have been trying to solve these problems. And let's open this in a new tab. All what you're seeing here is people's attempt to have the minimum amount of seams, of cuts, and the minimum amount of distortion. So you can see that for the same problem, this is one problem. This is just for applying the flat image of the Earth on a sphere, or the opposite, getting the spherical Earth to appear as a flat map. these are all solutions. I mean, this one here is a bit crazy as well, where everything is distorted, but in a different kind of way. And this is not a new problem. And what we're trying to do with UVs is, for each model, find which one of these or millions of other potential solutions we can apply. And this is the general, let's say, problem that needs to be solved in any case that appears with objects that have, let's say, organic forms and stuff like that. So let's go to the specifics now, and first start
Hey,
by...
Noseman,
Yes, please.
is it fair to say that all of those examples that you just had up a second ago
Yep.
have some distortion somewhere?
Exactly. And the reason is, in order for you to take an object like a sphere and unwrap it without any distortion, the only way to do that is to disconnect every single polygon. There's no other way. If you have even 2 polygons connected, you will introduce a certain amount of distortion. So the great question, Darren, and that indicates that what we're doing with UVs is we're trying to limit the damage or limit the amount of work we need to do. So that's why we try to find a balance between the cuts and the distortion. So to show that example with a sphere, if you take a sphere, let's say with this topology over here, and by definition, it has a spherical unwrapping. So I'm going to make it editable and go to the UV edit. You'll see what it does. It keeps all the polygons the same and puts the triangles here at the top and the bottom. But this causes the same problem that we get with the rectangular projection, the typical projection where we know from all maps where the poles look extremely big and Greenland is big and all that. If I were to avoid any kind of distortion, what I would need to make sure, first of all, is to make sure that each polygon has exactly the proper shape. So these are not rectangles. These are trapeziums, right? Here they're rectangles. So at some one of these polygons, let's take this one here, you can see that the actual shape of the polygon is incorrect. That means we're going to have stretching on one side. So the only way to take a sphere and unwrap it is to make every single polygon a separate polygon. And I think that if I go to edges and select all edges and UV unwrap, there it is. What you see here is the unwrapping of a sphere without any distortion. So this is one of the problems we need to solve. How many cuts are going to make our sphere better? So let me undo here and say, well, maybe we could go for UB, which is ring selection. First of all, everything is welded, and I can cut the top and the bottom, the parts of the model that give us most of the trouble here. And let's go and UV unwrap this. So this gives us more continuity. So we have bigger parts of our globe that are continuous. And that is one of the things that when you cut things up, you lose that continuity. So your texture, your image needs to have these spikes in order for it to fit properly. So and those are the limits we have to work with to do a successful UV unwrap. Maybe I need to cut one more and wrap it here. Yeah, now this is nice and rectangular, but we have more cuts and so forth. I can cut all these slices independently and get more of these here and do that UV unwrap. So now again, I'm getting more cuts, but less distortion per cut. And when I say cut, I mean these polygon islands and the cut seams. So the question now is, now we know the problem, right? We know the limits of our problem. We can't just disconnect all polygons, and we cannot, in order to avoid distortion. So the question becomes, what would be the optimal way? And just like with general visual effects and motion graphics, we only deal with the stuff that is visible, right? Only the stuff that we really care about, the typical Western movie studios where all houses are facades, because that's what the camera sees. And this ties into one of the questions from Ellie's list that says, what is the difference between doing UV for UVing for animations and UVing for stills? Well, with a still, what happens is that you get a certain view of your object. So what you could do is make sure that any cuts are not on the front side of your object. So that will be a typical thing, just like modeling things where you don't have to model the stuff that's not visible. That will be a general approach. So is there any question up to this point which addresses the general, the general? If anyone sees anything, just let me know. And if you have any questions, just add a question, capitalized, so we can identify it easily in the chats. So
can I actually mention something else?
Please do.
That you illustrated quite well. If you go back to the UV map for this guy that you did, you introduced so there's this balance, right? You got all of these islands, and they're much more representative of the actual geometry, which is great. So there's ideally no distortion. But we introduced a new problem potentially, and that is that maybe half of the texture space, half the number of pixels, are actually being used by these UVs.
Exactly. That is the let's say the real estate problem. Darren just mentioned one of the most important things that have to do with keeping things not only tidy but saving on space. For example, let's take this and pack it.
Yeah, getting high quality textures.
Yep. So let's pack this in the ideal way. So preserve orientation, no. Equalize island size, yes. Apparently, what happens here is that this seems to be the best way, according to Cinema 4D, to pack these in a rectangle. Now, before I move on, because I talked about, not a rectangle, actually, it's a square, what U and V stands for, and that's what another important part of the whole concept behind UV is the coordinate system. U and V are just letters that indicate, just like we call the spatial dimensions X, Y, and Z, U and V are, again, just two dimensions of a two-dimensional coordinate system. That's it. So this point here has a U of 0 and a V of 0. As you move this way, your U becomes 1 over here, which means that right here it's going to be half. And as we move upwards, we get 1 for the V here and 0.5 here and so forth. What this allows us to do is pinpoint any position on this rectangle, not by using absolute coordinates like centimeters or inches or anything like that, but using relative measurements. So a point on this, which is a 0.25, 0.25. So U 0.5 will be somewhere in the middle, and V 0.25 is going to be about a quarter up. So it will be somewhere around here. What's great about this is that if you have an image in Photoshop, for example, over here, which is not square, we can still calculate that position of that point just by using the relative. So 0.5 U is going to be halfway through whatever number of pixels we have. And 0.25 V is going to be a quarter. So that point will be here. If our image for any reason is even flatter, let's just crop this for the fun of it. So here's another image that's a rectangle again. Then what we're going to get for U 0.5, it's again the middle. And a quarter of a way up would be our V. So this is called a normalized coordinate system because it only takes values from 0 to 1 to indicate the active space. This is always going to be 0.1, 0.1, despite what the aspect ratio of our image is going to be. It could be a single line. It doesn't matter. It's going to be the end of the line, which is going to be 1.1. So this kind of unique coordinate system allows us for any kind of image, because images are only rectangular, right? We don't have circular images. The file format is always a rectangle, and we can pinpoint an area or a position a point on this just by indicating 4 coordinates which are within this space here. And this becomes extremely helpful when we're dealing with things that can stretch and be, have all sorts of aspect ratios. Anyone to add?
This is all making me think of like everything we're seeing here is like the importance essentially of UVs. But a lot of details about UVs, UV space, the islands and everything. But one thing that you showed with that, you had that like almost like a donut example that you had the 2 bends on the plane.
Yep.
Yeah, the thing that I really liked about this example is that it shows that we can't use a basic texture projection. So like even before we get into UVs, textures can be projected onto geometry in a couple of basic ways. And there is not one that is like a torus, like a sphere would create this, distortions,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And so that I don't know, I feel like that's a basic thing that like we've sort of skipped over. Do we want to get into that or no?
Oh, it is part of what I'm going to say because
Great.
yes. So this is a great segue because there's no linear way to teach UVs. It's just a general body of understanding. Number one, what UVs are, and number 2, what tools we have in our disposal, providing we understand what the problem is, and then how to use these tools in order to effectively solve each problem and each model. Not even each model. Each part of the model is the problem, right? When we do UVs for a complex 3D model, we're not solving one problem. We have to solve many problems depending on what size. Now, I'm going to pick up what Darren said and talk about what is the relationship between, and I'm going to use this file, the relationship between our material projections. And for that, I'm just going to use a Cinema 4D standard material. And let me go and load in here. I have a bunch of images over here. I'm just going to...
I think there's a UV grid in the asset browser.
Oh, yeah, I have UV grids as well. I don't want to go with the UV grid right now, although,
Cool.
you know something, I have a bunch of UV grids. I'm going to go with the UV grid, whatever. Why not?
I'm sorry I said something.
Why not? No, that's not a problem. So let's take this and apply it to the plane, right? Forget about the deformers for now. Those are not important, okay? Now, I'm going to go to my viewport and set this to no scaling so we get the full resolution here. And by definition, this is set to UV mapping, right? Let's forget about that for now because UV mapping we'll use, and I'm going to go to the plane and press C because it's a procedural object. It does have internal UVs, which are generated on the fly. But if I make it editable, I'm actually going to be able to see. And if you shift double click on a UV tag, you will get the UV configuration, right? And because this started as a plane, everything is a nice little square. Each UV polygon is a square. But what I want to focus on at this point is, what if our projection is not UV mapping and it's, let's say, spatial shrink wrap? Let's get a cylindrical one. Okay, what does projection mean? Well, it's very much related to UVs. A projection is nothing more than the UVs. If they were projected, it creates UVs internally using a very specific, let's say, cylindrical camera. Now, I think the best way to, what would be the best way to show this? Let me go to this.
There you
and
go.
we see this little, if you go
So
to
that's
your UV tool, and but what you will see here is that, funny enough, let me turn this off for a second. Look at this little cylinder and look at the UV unwrapping here. There's the UV manager here. We have a red line across the U. We have a red line that goes around. and we have a green line that goes up. So we have a green line going up. So what this is actually doing for us, it's distorting the UV space so that it wraps around a cylinder. Now, I would have hoped that we could actually see those polygons, the UV polygons being created. I think the way I could do that is if I select all these, I think we have the and start interactive mapping, right? And here's the interactive mapping, and it asks me what material I want to use from the interactive mapping. Let me turn this on.
This was actually one of the first introductions that I had to the whole idea and concept of UVs, because it when you clicked on that, it created a new material tag with its own unique projections, and in that tag you can make all the adjustments that you would to a regular material, but it's like this temporary like placeholder while you use the the transform tools and the material tag parameters to adjust the projection. You'll see it happen in like as you
I'm not even going to use that. I'm going to use, now that I made it editable and remove the deformers, what we are seeing here, right? Remember, the material is set to cylindrical, and the cylinder is going to change the UV polygon positions. These are the UV polygons and their positions for each polygon. There's a position. I can't select it right there, but I can select it here. Oh, it won't show because it's created automatically. But the great thing about this is that you're seeing that the cylindrical projection, what it's doing is it's changing the way the UV polygons are generated, and thus taking this flat image and projecting it here. So this weird object you see here is taking the cylindrical configuration of the cylindrically distorted UV map and projecting it onto the UV plane. Now, this looks very odd, and it's very difficult for us humans to figure out what's going on when we see this. I'm just showing it to show you the relationship between a projection. If I simplify this, for example, and set this to a flat projection, this now starts looking a bit more obvious. And you can see that pointing the z-axis towards the object, the z-axis, the blue one over here, is actually allowing it sort of frames the UVs. Look at this little patch here that is outside here. We're taking a two-dimensional view, an orthographic view, just like we view things over here. We're actually seeing an orthographic projection of the UVs from this flat projection. So this is a very long and convoluted way to say that despite what projection you use, at the end of the day, all these projections just change the UVs of the object so that a flat image can be applied just as if we were creating these UVs manually. But these are pre-configured ways of seeing it. The cubic is interesting because the cubic is projecting 6 UV, let's say it's viewing from 6 different directions from each side, depending on what your rotation is. And it's going to give us a different UV island, a disconnected UV from each and every one of those views. The reason that they're on top of each other is, it's totally valid. It doesn't look good. And that's because this whole thing is rotated. If I go and zero out the rotations here, if I just right click here.
I also want to point out real quick that these are like, let's just be clear that these projections are not the UV map. What we get is we're getting a visual representation of the projection within the UV editor window, but the UV map of this model is what it was before you started messing with the projections.
Oh yeah, because we can have more than one UV map on an object. So if I select this is the original UV map. I'm going to make a copy of this, select it, and
well, you can also convert that what you did into.
Yes, you can do that. So this is a different UV map. So I'm just going to do this and, I don't know, scale these down. So we have one UV map, we have another UV map, we have a projection. All these as, let's say, data are three different versions of the same polygons. They're just in different positions. So this is a valid UV map that's stored internally as a projection. But somewhere inside the code, the memory of Cinema 4D, there's another UV tag that just represents this. And because we can do this, we can have different materials applied on our object. And this ties into how you would solve a particular problem if you want to solve it. So I'm going to go all the way back before this was even made editable and show you one of the typical techniques.
Can you, real quick, can you show how to take that awkward projection that you created, like redo a couple times to go back to one of those projections? Can you just show real quick how to just sort of quickly convert that into UVs?
Oh, yeah. So let's delete this. Let's take this cylindrical projection. And you can go and you say, generate UV coordinates. And this will generate sub-objects. I don't care about the sub-objects. And now we have, even if I delete this, now I have 1 and 1. Where's my cylindrical? Oh.
You didn't really.
No. It's because of the deformers. For some reason, the deformers are giving me a bit of a hard time here. So let me do the current state to object. I don't want to solve this right now. Current state to object. There we go. So we have our cylindrical projection, another cylindrical projection. This is a cylindrical projection. So go here, tags, generate UV coordinates. And now I have this and I have this. And these now, it's like making the
actual UVs.
These are actual UVs, and I can take this and move it around or scale it and so forth.
Right. And that you cannot do with projections.
You cannot disconnect them, no. It's the equivalent of using a procedural cube and a editable cube, in the fact that I can take the editable cube and move around points, whereas the cube itself as an object can't. So when you're doing a projection, basically you're generating procedural UVs, which you can't move the points. Whereas when you flatten them down, you can. Yep.
I was wondering if I could show my screen to speak to something about again, a difference between the projections and UVs.
Can you say that again? I lost my concentration. Come again?
I was wondering if I could share my screen.
Yeah, you can share your screen.
Okay, thank you.
You don't need my permission.
Okay. Cool. So this is a preset example from the asset browser. Anyone can do a search for bottle, and you'll find a beer bottle. I got that in here, but what I did was I changed the label's projection to cylindrical, and then I animated a bit to show you where this projection is failing as this bottle is animated. It's revealing the tiling, right? So this is one reason why we need UVs as opposed to just a perfect projection, right? We can have a perfect projection, but as soon as we start animating something, you can start sliding around, as we see here. And that's why that little trick is so valuable that Noseman just showed us with the generator assign UVs. Another option you have, if you don't want to generate or assign UVs out of this, you can add a special material tag. This is the pin material tag. And this actually sort of locks in this projection onto the mesh. So now as you see it's deforming, that material is fixed, that texture is fixed. I just wanted to show that real quick. Thanks, everybody.
I was muted. You're very welcome. Yeah, this is one of the many tools, because the fundamental thing is the technology behind, the data behind UVs. On top of that, we need to understand the limitations, the fact that everything is a rectangle, and that we have that limit between minimum distortion, and which means maximum disconnectivity, and then maximum distortion, which everything can be nicely connected, but we have distortions. And then we have the tools. And what Darren showed is one of the tools we have in our disposal to use a projection, which will essentially change if you have animation on the object, because the projection is that, you know, a fixed thing. And that little tag allows the distortion of the geometry to propagate, so to speak, to the UV generated geometry, and that keeps it quite stable. Now, an important thing about doing, you know, solving some of these problems, and again, I'm rushing and doing backwards just to get everything to their original state. Okay, so we have this weird object over here. And now the question, one of the many questions, not the question, one of the many questions is, okay, let's assume this is a fixed object and current state object. Again, CSTO here and select all that. And here's our object, all right? And it has this configuration of UVs. That's how we start. We can have no UVs if we wish. You need to ask yourselves, and that is the most important part of this. What kind of texture am I going to put on here? What is this object, first of all? What are we representing here? Because a different type of object will have a different requirement for continuity, for example. Because what we see here with this UV grid, okay, if you're just doing arbitrary colors and you want something that's colorful, it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want. But if you want this to have a certain type of flow, let's make this so that this was a carpet, which I sort of folded, brute force folded. So I want all the patterns to appear to be nicely undistorted on this. How would I go about this? So let's go back to the UV edit. And the way you can start with this is, first of all, when you're using the UV tools, make sure you're in the appropriate mode. What I would do to start with this is to just relax it. And we come to the concept of relaxing UVs. And relaxing UVs means with the given seams, right? Currently, the only seams we have, the only cuts we have are at the edges around the model. So these lines here, what they represent, and one thing I need to mention is that you can select components here, points, edges, and polygons, and they will propagate here, or you can select them here. So you can go and do a UL loop selection around everything, or you can select the border. And I selected something wrong here, so let me deselect that. There you go. And I have one more to select, this one. So you can see the open edges are our only seams, and these are natural seams, right? Because we don't have continuity on the 3D model. There's no connection between this side and that side. And what relaxation would do is, using various algorithms, you're going to find a lot of these algorithms. And we have 2, LSCM, ABF, and Ministry of Flat, the automatic UV packing. So we have 3 main unwrapping, but this is more complex. The packed, also known as, if you right click and you say material, set UV from projection and go here, the automatic packed UVs, that's the one that's called packed here. And that's a great algorithm that does a hybrid between slicing, creating seams, and unwrapping. But let's go back to the original thing. I only want the open edges to be open. I want the rest to stay as it is. So go to your polygons, make sure that either all are selected or none are selected, the typical thing that works with modeling. And you go to UV Relax and you try the algorithms. And LSCM is more aimed at organic models, whereas ABF is more aimed at hard surface models. As far as I remember, it could be the reverse. You can edit out the wrong answer, the wrong statement from the video. No one's going to do that. So you press apply, and look what it does. So it finds the areas that will produce the highest distortion are the ones that turn, right? The inside parts over here. So it'll be this and this. And you can see that what it's tried to do is create some sort of stretching on these things that under this algorithm will give us a better, better distortion. Now, I'm going to bring this to straighten it out, and I'm going to show you some of the tools. If I want to straighten this out to be upright, you select one edge you think is perpendicular. So this is vertical, right? This is the middle of our model. It's going to be vertical on the UV. And you say align UV islands. All you need is one. And then you can say fit UV to canvas, and it's going to put everything right at the edge. There you go. So now what we see here is that, well, why didn't this change, right? A lot of people will say, but why didn't this change? That's because the material is still stuck at cylindrical. So make this UV mapping, and it will read the UV maps from the UV tag on its right. There's a rule here that if you have multiple UV tags, the one right next to the right of the material is the one that's going to be applied with this. Well, test it and make sure it works. So what we're seeing here is sort of a good unwrapping. We have a bit of discontinuity. You see these lines over here that are going sideways instead of going, the same way as the lines go down and all that. But this is because these lines are going sideways. But as far as distortion is concerned, we haven't avoided it. You can see certain parts of the graphic seem to be a bit more high resolution, so compressed. The smaller something is, the higher resolution it's going to appear. Whereas at the edges, you'll find that these appear to be quite bigger, so lower resolution. But this is a good compromise. Now, if this was a graphic where you needed your lines to, let's say you had some bump maps that you wanted them to flow properly, well, this then is not your solution. You wouldn't be able to do that. So that's why defining what the problem is and what you want to do is very important as far as how you're going to solve it. If this is a general image where you want some nice colors on it, maybe the map of the earth, you want it to be here, something like that, okay, you can get away with that. But if you want a very specific structure, if you want to draw a straight line in Photoshop that will map down here, then you won't be able to do that. So then you would ask, all right, how am I going to do that? Well, in that particular case, when you want the geometry to flow the same way as your artwork flows, and again, imagine if I want to draw a line that goes all the way down here. Well, the only way to do that is to make sure that at least these polygons go down a straight line. And that's not going to be easy because that's going to transfer distortion onto other polygons as well. My solution for this would be, for this particular thing, do a total flat projection. So just make sure you go to the original flat projection you had and just draw those lines, which are going to be straight without any problem whatsoever. So this is this example is the way you want your graphics to flow, your artwork to flow, your texture to flow on the object will define what kind of unwrapping you are going to do. And that's why the problem is not simple. It's contextual. It has to do with what you're trying to do. Now, I do want to introduce one more thing that is, it's, I think, very important about textures and stuff like that. For many cases, instead of a bitmap, we want to use a procedural texture like a noise, for example. So let me go here and create a very simple noise. And you may have seen, and let me make sure that my viewport is no scaling, so everything is nice. And I think over here, I just need high quality noises. So that high quality noise will give you a better result here. And what I'm saying is generalized. It works in Redshift as well. So in my little noise here, the space is very important. So if you put texture, it's going to take whatever this texture's projection is, this projection. Currently, it's UV mapping. If you put UV 2D, of course, it's 2D, then despite what kind of setting we have in projection, it's always going to use the UVs. But then we have all these object, camera, and so forth. And the important part is that any noise that, or any shader that can be calculated in 3 dimensions, and noises are one of those, you don't actually need UVs unless, and I'm going to talk about the unless. So if I set this to object, what you will see is that the noise is going to be perfect. You're going to have no distortion because the actual noise is calculated in object space or global space. It doesn't really make a difference. It has nothing to do with the surface itself. Imagine if this noise is a 3-dimensional noise volume, and wherever the surface touches that area, it just puts that little noise either darker or lighter. What the problem with this is that if I start moving polygons, the polygons will start swimming, and I see a lot of people not setting up their textures properly. And then you move this, and you can see that, look at that, the noise, look inside here. The noise stays in place. So if you animate this, especially if you have it set to, let's say, world means that if I move the object, the noise stays static and the object swims. Maybe that's the effect. If I set it to object, then the noise is calculated in 3D space, but based on the object. So I'm moving polygons now. So what I'm going to do now is move the object and show you the difference. That was, sorry. So world, it swims because the noise is stuck to the world coordinates. Object, it moves with the object because now the noise is calculated based on the object coordinates. But if I deform this object, I'm going to have problems, just as I showed you when the polygon moves. So if I move all the polygons and the object stays in the same place, I get swimming. In that case, when you want your shaders to stick to your object, no matter what, then you actually need to go to UV or texture to keep them in the correct position. And I'm going to put it on texture. And now you can see it's moving, but if I move the object, again, it's going to stay with it. If I set this to UV, although we don't get a good view here, I'm under the impression, and let's see if this is going to work, that the noise is going to move with the UVs. Look at that little blob there. It's moving with the UVs. Because the object, doesn't matter how we move the 3D polygons. If I move the 3D polygons, the UV polygons still stay in the same position. So this is a mistake I've seen a lot of people doing, not selecting the correct type of shader projection for any shaders that have this sort of space. And the result is that you animate something, a bottle with bump on it, you put a little bit of an animation to it, and you see the bump moving through the object. So this is the solution. You need to make sure you know exactly where you want the noise to be. Sometimes you want the noise to be global because, I don't know, you're creating an effect where the object moves through the noise. But if you want it stuck on your object, depending on what you're using, you have to set these settings correctly. So what's happening with questions there? Questions.
Real quick, I think we need to say bye to Ian. He's got to head to SIGGRAPH.
I got to head to SIGGRAPH. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Bye, guys. Have fun. Great session.
Have fun.
Bye, Ian.
All right, cheers. Bye.
Yeah, we have had quite a few questions in, actually. That we've sort of been starring in the background. Did you want me to run through the ones that are kind of relevant to what you're talking about?
I don't
Or
care.
any?
Everything is interesting. Just go from top to bottom, and anything I feel that may be totally outside the concept, I will avoid it.
Okay, perfect. I will just run through them then. So Greg was wondering, could you explain a technique? I mean, this may have been what you were just showing actually anyway. Could you explain a technique to reduce or eliminate distortions in UV and material when using pose morphs to deform the mesh? I've thrown it on screen as well.
Well, yeah, the only way to avoid pose morphs and deformations and PLA and all that, they will have exactly the same result. As long as your model moves, and I'm going to go back to the other little texture here, the one I had, this UVW mapping. So if I have this, let's say this is the image, the skin, or imagine this is an arm or a finger, all right? And I have the fingernail here nicely. Well, if I move the point, there is no way not to distort, right? You can do that on your own skin. Find the flabbiest part of your body and draw something with a marker, pull the skin, And your little drawing, if you have tattoos, you can try it with your tattoos. You can pull your skin and the tattoo is going to move. So that's a normal thing to happen. If, let's say, you're using a post-morph to morph one object into another, that's a totally different situation. And this is, I wouldn't say it's the problem. It's one of the fundamentals of doing these things. Context is the most important thing that defines how you're going to do things. What I would like, Greg, is simplify a file, just one texture, no plugins or anything like that. Very simple post-morph, and hit me on Twitter, DM me with a link at NosemanGR, and I can take a look at the file and even add this. If you send it soon, I can add it to the content here for something over the next few weeks, and because any questions you post, it's a question that comes from the real world, right? I'm like a theoretical physicist, a bit smarter, but the same equivalently, doing the same stuff. Where I work on the theories of stuff, the production scenes are the real life experiments that we need in order to prove our theory. So, and that applies to everyone. Just simplify things. I do not want to see third-party plugins, light kits and stuff like that. Remove everything. Redshift and Cinema 4D and anything that is Maxon generated. Simplify the scene to the simplest form that exhibits the problem. Write a small bullet point or paragraph what you expect to see or what the problem is, and I'll probably find a solution with around that, or explain why it's not working or what needs to happen. Next question, please.
Cool. So Mr. J was wondering, when should I use hard edges? I always find myself just smoothing all edges because hard edges causes seams when baking.
Well, baking, yeah, because I think you're using the automatic. So if I go here and I say, let's say bake object, it's up here. It's up here, the object bake. All right, bake object or bake material. So we have the option of keep UVs or not, and the same applies to bake material. And if we keep UVs, it will keep the UVs we've set here. But if we don't keep UVs, it will revert to the automatic unwrapped. And this is a very good time to show you what the automatic UV packed, the Ministry of Flat algorithm will do. So let's go here and let's go, I can right click material and say set UVW from projection and go and say, how would Ministry of Flat unwrap this? And this is what it comes up with. It says, well, I don't need to do any cuts. I'm going to compensate for some of the polygons that have these, a bit of a distortion. But if this was a more complex model, it would actually choose to add some cuts. And let's go and do that. I'm going to go here and do an inner extrude, and then an extrude, and another extrude, and then an inner extrude, and then just move this to the side, right? So now we have a totally different model. All the new UVs have been packed over here. Let's select everything and go and do an automatic UV packed. So what the algorithm decided to do, it said, well, I can't fit all these seamlessly with the rest of the model. It keeps everything that's seamless, and I think it's going to give us a different algorithm if I go and create a new one. Let me test this. Right, let's go automatic UV packed. No, it gives us the same one. Excellent. So it says, well, we can get away with some distortion for the majority of the model. But this particular thing, because it has the hard edges, the algorithm says, well, I consider these need to be cuts because being hard edges, the continuity is less required. And here's the catch. And this is something that most people do not know about the Ministry of Flat, the packed UV algorithm. It is optimized for 3D painting. So the sole objective of the Ministry of Flat unwrapping was to create the best possible conservation of area, but it introduces both distortion and discontinuity, so seams. And the only thing it was designed for, we can use it in many other ways, but it was designed for 3D painting. It wasn't designed for you to have this nice little square texture with everything nicely packed and all that. No, no, no. It was designed to give you the optimal unwrapping so that you can go with a 3D painting software, whether it's body paint or something else, or substance painter and so forth, and paint in a way where you are now creating the seams by painting on the adjacent polygons. And the reason your baking is causing these breaks is that your objective of not creating seams is not part of what this particular algorithm was designed for. So I know that it's not always easy, but if you want to use baking, I would suggest you first unwrap your object in the way that, and keep the continuity you want. So that's actually a very good segue to say, okay, how would you unwrap this if you wanted maximum continuity? Well, the reply is, well, you can't. You can't. You have this thing coming out from the side where, whether you like it or not, if you want to keep this continuous, you're going to have extreme amounts of distortion, and that's just about it. So let's assume I didn't have any UVs here, all right? You can remove the UVs, and you would start by saying, okay, I just click on UV Unwrap. There you go. That's all you have to do to create a UV tag. Click on this, and this will give you, because by definition, it doesn't create more seams. It will only retain the natural borders of the object as seams. You click on this. This is the UV Unwrap that has maximum continuity, but at the cost of immense distortion. This is like 2 pixels, right? And this is exactly when I said that that UVs, you solve UV problems within the limit of maximum distortion and maximum discontinuity. Every polygon is its own little UV detached thing. This is the one edge of the problem. You have so much distortion here that this probably won't work. So you will never have an ideal situation. And then you have to choose and say, okay, is there any part of this model that won't be visible when I'm creating my animation, or will be not much visible? If the back of it is that, then you're starting to have a potential solution. So let's assume that I'm making a still, and my final shot is from this angle. Then everything behind here can actually be cut. So let's go to edge mode, and let's start selecting. I need the selection tool, the move tool. The selection tool is my favorite move tool. And sorry, the move tool is my favorite selection tool. I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to disconnect these as well. And let's see what this is going to do now. Look at that. So what this is doing now, it provides me continuity in all these areas. So as far as my model is concerned, everything that's visible, this part and this part and this part here, they have pretty good continuity, a bit of distortion, but here it's a hellscape of discontinuity. So if the context of this particular 3D model and 3D texturing was to view it from this angle, or a limited rotation, a limited animation, this would be the solution. I would add the seam in the parts of the model that are not very, very visible. But if then you say, no, I want to do a 360 around this, then my answer would be, good luck with that. And you know, the solution will be disconnect this part and then put it back together and use a 3D painting software, or take these. All right, let me show you how you can do stuff in Photoshop. Let's go and disconnect this. I'm going to select a few more edges here. Shift clicking here and shift clicking here. I could always select them easier over here, but I don't like the easy ways. There you go. So now I've disconnected those. Maybe I want connectivity here. So let's go and select. Let's select these and weld them. And you can weld and relax as well. So now I have that thing that was given to me approximately by the UV packed algorithm. And what you can do now is use this, and although there is a command that will give you the UV polygons as a texture, that's in the body paint thing, which I always forget if it's in the layers. Let me select all polygons and see. There's something, yeah, there's something you can do, but the easy solution is take a screen grab. So if you press Control Tab, when your mouse is over something, it will maximize that. Get a screen grab. Sorry?
Are you talking about create UV mesh layer?
Yeah, you need to have a texture though that's activated for body paint. I don't want to do that now. So
you can just create it under File. I think you can just do Create Texture and then create UV Mesh Layer.
yeah, it's 2 more clicks. I'd rather
too many clicks.
I'd rather do it with 6 clicks than 2 clicks and using my brain. So I just took a screen grab of this, and you can go to Photoshop and just paste it. So new, enter, paste. Make sure you crop it correctly. Just go to your edges here. Doesn't really matter, as the song says. You know, you just go here, make sure you do that. If you're a couple of pixels off, doesn't really matter. And there you have it. Now you can go and get your texture, do some, I don't know, distortions here, paint your little graphics here and all that. And if you want to make this seamless, see what I did there? Seamless. You just make sure that you paint the same color here and the same color here. And actually, this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to take my brush, and I would assume the longer edges, so these 2 edges here, this one, are this one and this one, okay? So let me undo here. And what I'm going to do in this layer is I'm going to paint a red line that goes over that and paint a green line over here.
Just so people know, there is actually a built-in feature in the UV edit window that will actually it'll actually color where edges are shared, so that if you take a screenshot of that and bring it in, you wouldn't have to paint them.
So here's my image. This is my overlay. Here's my image. Let's go and save this. I'm going to go to today's lesson, week 1 projects. Let's add a new folder text. I'm doing that on my other monitor, and I'm going to save this as something. I'm just typing letters. I can't think of a meaningful name to give that. And now let's go back to Cinema 4D and Control Tab to bring everything, click Control Tab to bring everything back. And let's create a new material. And let's just go and open the materials, go to this new, I said new material. Let's create a new material. And let's just go and load that thingamadoodle here. So go DPP.
I feel like you're all the clicks you avoided earlier, you're now having to do.
Exactly. So there you go. And let me make it viewport, no scaling. There you go. You can see that I wasn't very accurate. Doesn't matter. This shows that continuity you're lacking because of the configuration of the object. You can actually go and compensate in your painting program, whether you're using body paint or Substance Painter or Photoshop and all that. So there are ways to go about it when the model itself doesn't allow you to do these things, but using a simple unwrap. Then what you're going to do is you're going to fudge it. You're going to go on your texture, and you're going to paint where it's necessary to create the continuity. And the great thing about this now is that, you know, this here is whatever color it is. This is going to look correct, right? If I can make all these.
For the record, I would not do this in this basic type of sort of getting a blueprint thing. I would not do it in Photoshop. I would just do it all in Cinema 4D body paint. And then after I get my map colored how I need it, then I would bring that into Photoshop. Because I feel like when you start out in Photoshop, this is my opinion, of course, right? I feel like when we start out doing this in Photoshop, we are guessing to a degree. And to someone that's not as familiar with UVs, painting directly on the model and body paint eliminates that guesswork.
Yeah. If you know how to navigate yourself around, what Darren's saying is absolutely correct. Always use the tool which you're more familiar with and you can work with, and that's just about it. And this is the whole thing. We have our transitions here. Now I can go and I can use my little, I don't know, what's that called, that thing that blurs things? It's called the blur tool. I can go in here and make this smaller and, blur this up a bit. You can do all these things once you have this, your map here, which you can add, so you can always see it, screen it. There you go. And you can do all these things, whether it's body paint. You can do these things in body paint as well. It's just that you're required to know how it works, and it's been left, on its own for so many years.
Yeah. But that said, with the paint setup wizard, it is not difficult to get going with it. Let's
get going. No, it's
get
not
that out there. Yeah.
But anyhow, this is an example. Oh, I want to draw black lines down those polygons, and I want them to be parallel. There you go. I'm going to draw. These are not black, but you get the idea. Don't get held up on.
Well, actually, technically, if we're going to print, red is black.
I know the orientation. So this is a smiley where the mouth is outside the face. Save this. Come on, I'm being artistic. This is the extent of my.
I know, it's beautiful.
Thank you, Ellie. Always a nice. Don't believe anything Ellie says. It's always reload image. And there you go. So, understanding what your topology is and various ways you can mitigate some of these problems, and these are the potential solutions. And you have to be able to know enough. So I think the big secret, and something we can touch upon in the other in the other shows we're going to have moving the future, or even subject for tutorials, is when would you know that a particular solution is not going to work? And that has to do with understanding, this is a model where it has this thing sticking out. If this was made from paper, imagine if these were little pieces of paper and you had this made out of little pieces of paper stuck together. How would you put this on the floor flat without any overlapping? You can't, unless you cut some pieces out. And this is the experience. The more experience you get, you will say, this model, no way. We do need to have some discontinuity. We're going to have to add some seams. And then you go to the next step. What are the best seams to detach? But in a nutshell, that's what UVs are. It's solving a problem a step at a time. And I think that I just want to show the next part of, and this is a good example. This is a model I downloaded from a 3D repository. I pulled out. This is a tank turret. Now, a very important part of UV unwrapping and doing everything to make your models unwrap in the proper parts is selections. Selecting geometry becomes the most important tool before you even touch these things. And this is an extremely problematic model for many reasons. It's converted from CAD, I would assume, or something like that. And let me show you. Knowing the limits of what you can expect and how much work you're going to put into something will define what solution you're going to try and apply on this model. So,
hey, Noseman?
Yep.
Do you or does anyone object if I show a simple practical example before you get into that with the selections?
I won't object, so go ahead and do it. And if anyone else objects, I don't care. Go ahead.
If Noseman says so, then it's allowed.
Okay. Can we move the our little Kyle? Can you move our? Oh, thank you. Nailed it. Okay, so you did perfectly. Thank you, sir. All right. So what I want to do is I want to put a texture on here and edit the UVs, and I want to do it very practically. So I just have these textures. There's a color texture here of this ribbon, and there is an alpha channel. These are also from the asset browser. They're in the material. First, I'm going to show you, like right here, the basic idea, the most basic simple levels. I'm going to basically go like, do essentially some sort of flat projection. And then I'm going to right click on that tag and I'm going to say fit to region, which does a couple of things. Changes the projection to flat if it's not already there, and then it sets all of this stuff, the coordinates. Now I'm going to turn off the tiling, and that's awesome for a flat plane, and then as soon as it's deformed, it doesn't work, and we've seen why earlier. And also that wouldn't work so well here either. So if I put this on here and I say fit to region, and I want it to wrap around this region, it's not really playing very well here. So what I actually want to, oh wait, is that that's front label. I want this on the bottle. Okay, yeah. So what I really want to do here, rather than what I just showed you, is I want to take this, I want to put it on the bottle, and then I want to change the projection to cylindrical. And with this texture view and a projection display set to either grid or solid, which I prefer because it gives me a better visual representation, I can now right click on this tag, say fit it to the object. So that cylindrical projections fit to the object. I can now go and I can turn down the V, which we know is the green arrow. And I can turn down the U, and I can actually see that in the grid and in the texture. And I can start sliding this around to where I want it and turn off tiling. And I can get this basically right where I want it. Now there is some distortion because of the tapering that's happening here. So I just want to show you real quick how to convert this into UVs. The NASA's is a generate or assign that I want to create another UV tag. Let's try generate. Yeah, there we go. So now we have a new UV tag, and we'll go to the UV edit layout where we can see those UVs. What I want to do with this region here, and let's go to the faces and select those right there. And it's a rough selection, but now I'm going to go to, there's a special scale that we have, or do I want the shear? But anyway, let's go to the edit. Anyone know where non-uniform scale is?
It should be the scale has a little fly out window. Go to the scale tool. There's no fly out window there. Oh.
Yeah, no, because it's not in there. Let's
wait.
Well, you know what? Let's go Shift C, non-uniform. Okay, let's
in UV mode.
Are you just searching media at the moment? Is that why?
I am. Thank you.
It's okay.
Non-uniform scale pops up right there. I think so. There we go. So with non-uniform scale, we can like click and drag to scale something like this, right? Depending on how you drag your cursor, you're scaling a certain way. But that's not actually what I wanted, is it? I wanted like this skew. So I'm going to go to this guy, which Noseman hates this thing. And there is like a, there we go. That's what I want. I want something like that. That way I'm sort of pulling those in, and I'm sort of respecting the taper that's actually happening in the geometry. This is not perfect, but I just wanted to show you sort of a simple example here. So thank you. Did that work? Any thoughts?
No, that was cool. That was cool.
It was cool. It's, what I like about what Dan showed is that, to again, context, the way you're going to get the solution you want, the final result you want, can be approached depending on what the subject matter is. Because it's a bottle, for example, and that's a transparent label, it doesn't have continuity on the back. And you take advantage of that. You just select your polygons, brute force. You can move them to another place, make sure that you adjust the UV tile, which we're going to talk about probably in another session. But there you go. You just deform the polygons to comply to the image itself to compensate for that. So it's just one of a myriad of tools you may have. And that's why it's important for everyone watching this. Please be active. Ask your questions. Do not be shy. Start an account with a different name. I do not care less. Send us your questions, because it's your production woes, your production problems that will inform us on how to present this information the best possible way. Other than me, none of the people on the team are vain, right? I am. We like to help you. I just feel this, it's a superiority complex, but the result is the same. We provide you with the best information. Please send your questions, send your most challenging files. Yeah, the reply you may get is that this is not possible. You have to compromise somewhere, but please do that. It helps us and every other user. It's the best way of giving is asking for help. So back to our selections. So let's look at this and say, what would I like to do with this? Right, first of all, I would like to put some decals on this. Well, decals, you just make a material that has an alpha channel and you project it at the front. And you can put a flag here. You can put, the name of the driver. There you go. That's easy. How do I create something out of this? So let's begin with the automatic stuff. Let's right-click, go to material. Go here, go to the gear icon, and let's see automatic packed UVs. And this is what this is going to give us, automatic packed. And the view filters, I think I've turned off. Have I turned off stuff? Yeah, I've turned off some stuff. UV seams and UV polygons and UV mesh. There you go. And I want to turn off the filled polygons. I want to turn these off. Excellent. Now, this is not bad if you're going to paint on this, because it takes advantage of the of the most of the space you have on your UV tile, and you can go and paint on this, and everything's going to be fine. But what if you don't want that? Maybe you want to use some Photoshop textures where the continuity is here. Well, in that particular case, you scrap everything. So I always begin with a frontal projection. That's it. Now, the frontal projection is one of those projections that will give you as seams all the open edges of the polygon. It doesn't add any seams by itself. And the second thing now is to start disconnecting objects which are not connected to each other. Now, here's the most powerful tool in terms of selections that I use to do these hard surface unwrappings is the Phong break selection. So go to your polygon mode, deselect everything, go to the Phong break selection, and we can go here. Phong break selection. It's in UV mode here, so I need to select my model. There you go. Now it activates the 3D part. And what this does, I'm going to press spacebar to go back to the tool. If you press spacebar, it actually rotates around all the potential attributes, tool attributes, object attributes, and so forth. So if you select your object here, while you're in the fog selection and you lose this, don't go select the tool again, just press spacebar and it will move to the latest tool attribute. So now what it's doing here, it's taking all the, let's say, Phong edges, the blue, look at the blue ones. These are not disconnected. The white ones are disconnected. They're separate parts of the model, but the blue ones are connected polygons that have more than 20 degrees of declination. So that means that you can go and select parts of the model that have similar amounts. And if you increase this, look at that. Oh, I can go and select this. Just click on this. Now that's a separate model. Now, if you go to the UV Unwrap here and you click on the gear icon, you can, now you've got polygons, right? When you're in polygon mode, it will always take just the selection. There you go. So we have this part of the model. This is nicely unwrapped. I'm not going to do anything else with this. So you can always go and say, all right, select, let's go and hide the selected. There you go. Now I'm going to move forward. You go back. I always like to have this open. And you say Phong break selection. What do I want to select now? Let's find a part of the model. Oh, look at all that. This is nice, smooth model. Good. UV Unwrap. Let's move it out of the way. Oh, this looks terrible. This looks like a Pokemon of sorts. Like, right. I don't want this. I want to disconnect these little ears on the side. And you can see there's an overlap here. I'm getting overlapping polygons. And that's because I didn't define any cuts, and it just unwrapped things the best way it could and created this these overlapping polygons. So the next step would be, let's start disconnecting parts of this which I feel shouldn't be welded together. What you do, you switch to edge mode. Now, remember, the polygon, these are the only polygons that are selected, and it's going to become important in the next step. If you go to edge mode, the UV Unwrap gear icon has this restrict to polygon selection. That is a polygon selection that is now in the background. You can't see it because we have edges. If that is on, anything I do here is going to be confined to those selected polygons. The ones, if I press OK here, look at that, and go to the polygons and move it up. The other thing you could do is you go to the edges and you just make sure you don't realign. So at least it stays in place. So I have all these polygons selected, edge mode. Let's go and start disconnecting parts. I'm going to click on this, just one edge, UV Unwrap, and it splits these. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to say click, 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 Unwrap. It splits those. I'm going to go on this side. I'm going to say click, Unwrap, split those. Let's go on this side here. Click, 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 and let's split these. And slowly, you iterate through your model as you go on, and you disconnect various parts of it. You will see that in certain situations, you can't zoom anymore. So to solve this problem, you will have to go to your 3D. So select the edges here, press S here, and go and find them and do your selection in the 3D. That's a great thing about the system, that you can interchange your selections from polygon selections to edge selections. There you go. So I can take this edge and UV Unwrap it. There you go, disconnected. There's a bit of a mess here. You can see, let's go on this side, press S, go on the other side, press S again, rotate around, go on the outside. Good. Now I know where I am because I can't zoom in here, right? Oops, I was pressing the wrong button. Am I? Oh yeah, I've zoomed in. Look at that. I've reached the limit of 10,000%. So I can do my selection here, deselect this, and go and find that little edge, which if you cut, it's going to release that polygon. UV Unwrap. Still something going on here? Again, you go and find it. Maybe I need to cut this little edge. But this, I would say, not so easy process is what's going to allow you to start breaking this apart. At any moment, you can go and select all these polygons and do a UV packing just to bring them in the right position. There you go. I've got these cut. I've got this cut. I've got this cut. Move on. Go here and say, what do I want to cut? Go to my edge mode. I'm going to cut this and this. UV Unwrap. See, there you go. That's gone. Here, I have a bit of a mess. Which part of the model is this? Everything I'm saying now is part of the process of unwrapping an object that has terrible topology. And, oh, this is the thing that sticks out. Good. So what I can do here, well, I'm going to go to my move tool, deselect everything, and then find that those polygons around this that will allow me to disconnect all that. And so on and so forth. I would go for something like this, and then I would go here, and I'll select my shift this one. I'm just going to do this, and then I'm going to start wrapping it up, because although I haven't looked at the clock, it appears that time has flown. And
I have a quick question for you based on what you're doing right now. So when you look at this UV map, obviously with your experience, you know the things to change, but for someone who's new to UVing, what's making you decide which edges and seams to create and cut just by looking at that UV map?
I can show you immediately. So we have these two circles. It's just the same approach you would have if you were looking, if this was made of paper again. what are the parts that are overlapping? So look at this. Here, we have this circle and this circle here. We have these overlaps, right?
There's a cool little feature in here to show overlaps a little more easily and quickly.
Yep. There's one of the views here shows overlapping polygons with a red color, right? That will help you. And thank you for bringing it up. If you remove seams and mesh, you're left with this. So it's easy just to do this and see where UVs overlap. So you go to the areas where you have those overlaps, like here, and then you turn these on again. So the view is a good thing to have open somewhere. So let's no more overlapping. I want to show UV mesh and seams. And this is a good indicator that I want to cut this top surface off, right? So that it doesn't, although dealing with UVs requires some experience to move faster, it's common sense that's going to move you forward. So I want to find this. Where is it? Go here, press S. Oh, it's that thing. Good. What's the best tool to select that? Well, it's the Phong break selection. And get my angle down. Look at that. I selected only this. Once you select something, you don't even have to cut it. You can always press UV and wrap, or you can just move it out of the way. That's it. Done. Overlapping. And the way this is laid out seems legit. You can do that if you want to fix it a bit. But that is the basis of doing these kind of unwraps. Has to do with general common sense that what am I trying to avoid? Now you have this little overlap here. You know, unless you're going to do a hero shot on this turret and go this close, you won't be able to tell the difference here. But if you really, really want to fix that, well, instead of UVs, why don't you just fix the polygon problem? Get your knife, cut this polygon, the selected polygon, and go and fix it, because this is triangulated and it's got all these issues. Get your points, select the points, weld them all together, right click and weld. So sometimes modeling, oh, there you go. Now they're stuck together, no more overlaps. So sometimes the solution does not lie within the UV tool space per se. Look at that. Beautiful. I just added a point, welded those points, solved the problem in UVs, because there is a marriage between the 3D polygons and the UV polygons insofar as their connectivity. They could be separate, but a better 3D model allows for better UV mapping. So look at this. We've got all these little triangles. Like, you shouldn't have these to begin with, right? Spend a few hours or a few minutes, depending on how much time you have, to fix these kind of things. Weld any points that you don't need, and then you're going to have a much easier task. But as far as the methodology, it's all just logic. This is terrible here. Maybe this gap, do I want it? Don't I want it? Let's find out where it is. Again, select these, go here, hover, press S, find these gaps. Do I want these to be welded? Yes. Forget about UVs. I don't care about UVs. I care about 3D polygons now. So again, right click, weld, select the polygons here, spacebar, weld these. Let's go here. What's happening here? Select these polygons, weld. Select these two polygons, weld. Make sure you're not selecting polygons on the back, because I could be destroying the model. And I'm just switching with my spacebar. So spacebar, select, spacebar, weld, spacebar, select, spacebar, weld, spacebar, select, spacebar, weld. And there you go. So now I've stitched these up, and it's resolved the problem over here as well. And again, it's one of the ways you would go about doing this kind of thing. Selecting polygons that are connected. I can select all these and say UV and wrap if I want to fix something. So again, it's just a matter of looking at the model the same way you would assess a model, a 3D model, and say that this is, the topology is terrible. In equivalent ways, you would say that this UV unwrapping is pretty terrible because I'm getting these overlaps here. Again, for this particular one, I would actually go and weld the things together. Press S. There they are. So let's go here, right click and weld. Weld these. Weld these. Weld these, and slowly start bringing these together. I may have selected things underneath there. I do not even know. Select these two. UV weld. You can do UV welds as well. So select these, UV weld if it doesn't fail. And yeah, this is the repetitive process. The other thing I should say is that try and avoid working on totally unoptimized models. It may be the case that for something like this, retopologizing it or doing some heavy repairs on this, maybe some untriangulation, if it's going to work for this particular model, will provide you, maybe remesh this. I haven't tried this. I'm going to do this. It's totally outside the scope of this lesson, but you know something? Sometimes I'll be damned. So this is this concept. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you can put a heavily triangulated model under a remesh, and just as a starter, this will give you a starting point to start making some things. Make it editable, and then you can start working on this model rather than have to deal with that heavily triangulated model. And where the remesher shines is in these kind of configurations. The problem with the triangulation, and I know I'm digressing, but I think that this is all interesting, is that you can't do loop selections. That's a problem with triangulation. Look at this loop selection now. If I go back to the triangulated model, yeah, go and do a loop selection on this, right? UL won't work. So between selections, using your modeling tools wisely, selecting or making a model, upgrading the quality of the model per se, everything adds up to make your UV work a bit better. If everything else fails, what I would suggest, and I think it's a very important tool set for everyone, is just to get used to 3D painting. If not, the whole thing. Don't do the whole thing in 3D painting, but you can apply a general camouflage texture here using a 3D noise, and then you can potentially bake that onto a tile or something like that, or just leave it in 3D space and pin it as Darren showed us, and then use local textures with alpha channels to create dirt and all that kind of stuff. You can use your 3D painting not on the whole texturing process, but in parts of that texturing process. And don't forget, the best UV unwrapping for 3D painting, pure 3D painting, is the automatic UV packed. And it only took the part of the model that was selected, by the way. And yeah, oh, actually didn't do a bad job here. Yeah, do we have any questions? Oh, it's 20 to 2. Good.
We do still have quite a few questions. I wonder, do we want to kind of maybe speed round some or save them for following weeks? Because we do have 4 weeks of UVing.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff that we are going to see relating to that. Let's see if we can spend another maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes on specific questions. And yeah, we'll take it from there. I mean, if there's a necessity to address some very specific issues, you need to let us know so that we can, slightly change maybe the schedule or show particular things about those questions. But I wouldn't mind going another 5 or 10 minutes here so we can reply to some.
Yeah, absolutely. So quick one from Kenza. In your UVs for packaging design on Cineversity, you demonstrate pinning points before unwrapping. Is that still a feature in C4D?
Oh yeah, it is a feature, and it's a very important one if you want to have controlled sort of unwrapping. And I'm going to use a sphere. And let's find an interesting topology here with a sphere, because that's going to make it a bit more interesting. Hexahedron, I think. There you go. So what I'm looking for is I want to pin something down. If you're cutting a moving box that's been put together, you put it on the floor, and then you cut the edges you want to cut to open it and flat pack it and throw it in your recycling. That is now, it's going to be this little thing here. So I'm going to make this editable. And I can do whatever I want with this particular thing, but I think I'm going to go from the bottom side, and do a frontal projection. So the same thing applies. There you go. I have my starting point. I'm going to select this polygon here, control click to set it to points, and add pinpoints. So now those points are pinned. Let's go and add some cuts now. Go to edge mode. The pins are there. And let me go and add some cuts. So I'm going to cut this, Command Shift and click, Shift, Command Shift, undo, Command Shift, click. I cannot teach you how to select things accurately. Shift, Command Shift, click, and Shift. If the axis is bothering you, Alt D will get rid of it. So Shift, Command Shift, click. There we go. So I've cut these. I want this to open like a banana thingy. Now the top itself is a totally different situation. What I'm going to do, I'm click, Command Shift, click, and I'm going to open it like a cube. So click, Command Shift, click, and I'm Shift clicking to add it, and Command Shift click to do that. So what's going to happen here is that this top is going to unfold up, this is going to unfold down, and the three edges are going to unfold on all these sides. So I'm going to use the UV Unwrap. Click here. It says use pins. So I'm going to do that, and there you go. Now, it does move things because the Realign was there, but it's going to keep the relationship. So it's going to keep the angle of these, but it's going to move it to a different part of the tile, so it's not really a problem. And there you go. Exactly the same thing. I told Cinema 4D what points I want it to keep undistorted in the same relative positions. Then it applies all the seams, and then it relaxes everything so that everything flows downwards. And again, you can enhance this by adding more cuts here. Let's say you want to open these two up because there's a texture that cannot take any distortion. You do this again. So now you get this and so forth. We're adding less distortion, but more discontinuity. So we're working within those extreme boundaries and so forth and so on. Next question.
Cool. So does Cinema 4D have a UV spline mapper? For example, having a mesh and using a spline to determine the UV flow, similar to Spline Wrap changing UVs, but without deforming geometry?
No. So these are all the tools we have. We cannot tell, for example, this thing to flow in a certain direction, like do this and that. That is something we are lacking. You can do it manually, so to speak, but I don't think that was the ideal solution. If I had to do something like this and had some sort of spline which I had to follow, I would just do it incrementally. I would just select these, then use this to sort of rotate it around. Oh, why disconnect? I think there's a setting here that says keep neighbor components. I would do this and move it around. Oh, come on, the move tool, keep neighbor components. Turn this on. There we go. I would do something like that. I know it's not ideal, but no. The quick answer is no, we do not have a follow spline. We cannot draw splines here or follow anything else. So, sorry.
Cool. So should we do a couple more?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah.
Until you guys, you can keep going until you need to leave, because I can just sit here and talk about UVs all through the day, through the night.
Cool. So Roy was wondering, if you remesh your model after setting your UVs, will you need to reset your UVs?
That's actually a very good question. Let's take this, for example. Let me just clear UV pins. This is the UV. Let's go and do a mesher and see what comes out the other way. Why don't you try it at home? Let's do that. We are here, remesh. The remeshing is ready. Let's, I don't know, mesh density. Actually, what I'm going to do to make sure that it does work properly, I'm going to take this and I'm going to triangulate this. Then I'm going to take this and do a polygon reduction. And there's you go, polygon reduction. And reduce it by, I don't know, a few percentage points. Let's make this editable. And now we have, there you go. So we have that mesh, and let's remesh it and see what's going to be done. I'm going to keep a copy of this, make a copy, put it there, make it editable. Woo! What was that? So remesh, adaptive count, density, follow splines, detect hard edges auto. That's interesting here. Well, it kept the topology, but it lost the continuity. Yeah, replicate this and open a ticket with Max on support. Interesting. I did not expect that. But you have your answer. It does retain the general topology, but it loses the seams. It seems. Let me see if there's a setting. It could be a setting because I just used it as it is, but there isn't. Yeah, mesh density, density map, adaptive count, adaptiveness, hard edges, shade. No, that won't make a difference. Okay. Well, we have our answer. It doesn't retain. Yeah, I don't know if it's even possible because this is an algorithm that was implemented by Max on. Yeah, there you have it. Next question.
Would it be advisable to cut every polygon and use a 3D texturing tool like Substance to paint continuous textures? Is this a good?
Oh, you don't need to do that. Okay, so that's actually an excellent question. Although you would avoid any issues with distortion and continuity and all that, you don't have to do that. And the example is the automatic UV packed. If you're 3D painting, it doesn't matter what unwrapping you do, as long as your UV polygons do not overlap. That is the rule. So if I take my move tool and let's move it, I want to disconnect it now. See, there you go. If you have overlaps, the problem is that when you paint on that particular, those particular polygons of your model, you're going to get the same brush stroke on all of them, the ones that overlap. So as long as your polygons are not, your UV polygons are not overlapping, any UV unwrapping will give you a decent result, providing you have enough resolution in your image. That's why for these kind of situations, it's advisable to just use the packed method, because it was developed specifically to address these things, to allow you to paint by taking advantage of the largest part of your UV tile. So although in theory what you're saying is correct, if I were to take all my splines here and just UV unwrap, right, in theory this has zero distortion. But when you're 3D painting, it doesn't really make a difference, because most modern painters and even body paint does projection painting, which means that it takes into account the 3D size of the polygon, and the brush is going to adjust the size over here. So yeah, if for any reason you're creating a texture that you do require, for some reason, although you have terrible discontinuity here, you do require all the texels to be of the same size. You want, if you make a circle here, you want it to be the same size wherever you put it. In that case, this is the only solution that will provide that. But if you're doing pure 3D painting, then the difference of sizes and the various distortions you're going to have, providing you have enough resolution, that is what I need to emphasize on. You need enough resolution in your model to get that. You need to make sure that your smallest polygon has that portion of the image has enough resolution, and then everything else needs to be scaled appropriately. So it's not, technically wrong, but I think you're going to yield better results if you stick with the automatic UV packed.
That's also the same algorithm that Substance uses. So if you auto unwrap in Substance, it's the same algorithm as our auto packed.
That's fantastic. I know something I didn't know yesterday, or I didn't know a few minutes ago. Thank you very much for that, Ellie.
That's okay.
What else do we have?
Cool. So we've got quite a nice question here. What do you look for in a proper UV unwrap? I find when I automatically unwrap at times, I get a lot of pieces that look cumbersome.
Mm-hmm. I personally, I'm not looking for anything. My only thing is technically accurate, and I couldn't care less if the result looks good. I couldn't care less about how it was UV unwrapped. What in theory should be the important thing, and I don't do artwork, so I'm just a theoretical physicist, theoretical cinema 4Dist. What I'm going to say now, what you would look at is exactly the fundamental of UVs. Is make sure you don't have many discontinuous parts, because in the case that you need to repair something, you're going to have various issues with your textures, unless you have access to a 3D painting program, right? The other thing is, if you're going to do adjustments to the object itself, so this has these big surfaces here. So if I was going to go and do something to this like that, it's fairly simple for me to take this little thing and detach it, right? It's not a huge problem to do that. So if you're going to do some sort of addition to your model, some sort of editing to the model, then it starts becoming a bit more important how what your model looks like. If you have a mesh that has a lot of polygons and all that, there is a point where a high number of polygons becomes, it's un-UVable. You can do something automatic, you can do a projection, you can do something like that, but working with an enormous amount of polygons, if you have a scanned face that has 2.5 million polygons, it's not advisable that you would unwrap that. If anything, you should, remove some of the polygons. Not that you can't do it, but imagine if you have to go in here and start polygons, which are very, 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 very small. So, those are the things that do make a difference for me from a technical perspective. But whatever works, again, it's all about the final outcome. If you have some intermediate steps you need to take, editing the model, adding some things, or having to change some UVs to accommodate for something, then you need to, your mesh being nicer, quads, low resolution, and all that. Those are the things I'd be looking for. And of course, I want my UVs to take as much real estate off my UV tile, because that means that I'm maximizing the size of my bitmap file. Because if you have empty spaces here, that is wasted space in your bitmap file. Now, compression helps, but what if you don't want compression? So it's all a balance at the end of the day.
So we do have a few questions about UDIMs.
All right, I'm going to address the UDIM thing, and that's the last thing I'm going to say. Everything else, make sure you send it to Maxon, and we deal with it in the next lesson. So UDIMs is not a technology per se. It's a naming convention of image files. That's what it is. The UDIM specification is a naming convention, but it's a naming convention that many programs support. We do not support it directly. We cannot generate. We can read UDIMs in Redshift, and we can bake UDIMs using bake sets. But our let's say replacement, it's not the answer you want to hear, but this is the answer. If you take any UV tile and you offset it by 1, so you go here and you add a 1, or you'd say +1. There you go. So this is tile 0, 0. It's 0 that way and 0 that way. This is tile 0. This is the main tile. If I wanted a different material to be applied to this, in Cinema 4D, we use polygon selections. You go to select, you say store selection, you call this, let's say 1.0, 1.0. There you go. This is the 1.0. This is the selection whose UVs have been offsetted, right? When you use materials in this context, you need to make sure that, number one, your material tiling is off if you want it to be only here. And you need to make sure that the offset of that particular material is set to the appropriate 100%. Now, you don't have to do that, because if you have tiling on, it won't make a difference. But the whole idea is that automated UDIMs means that the program that opens a folder that has texture files, image files named 0001, 0002, 0010, 0011, it knows which UV set to get because the UVs are offset by that unit. So we can read UDIMs in Cinema 4D, but we have to manually assign. If I had to assign a UDIM set to this, let me put this at +2, +2. There you go. What I would have to do is open my model in Cinema 4D, go to the UV edit, select my UV over here, and I would have to go and say, double click. I would select everything in here. So I could double click or I select all these. Set store selection as 00 and assign the texture, the material built with the textures that are 00. I make a new material. I load my albedo. I load my roughness. I load my alphas. I load my normals, all the ones that have 00. And I would apply that on this selection. So I'm going to get my material from here and apply it to this selection. Done. Let me remove the previous one. Then I would go to my second tile. I would select everything in my second tile. I would go here and I would say select store selection. Call this would be, I think, 10 because it's on the right. Maybe it's the opposite way. Create another material, which is called 10. Double click on this, put all the textures that have the 10 and apply it to this selection here. 10 goes here. Then go back to my UVs, select the third tile. So you have to do this for as many UVs as necessary. If it's 5 or 6 or 10, it's not a big problem. If it's more, then that's where this automation is missing. But it doesn't mean you cannot do it. And you don't even need to offset. This is how the model is going to come inside from a program that saves, that exports UDIMs. So there is a way to do it. Read the specification to understand exactly where each tile moves, and you can create your own UDIM specification. You can say, well, I'm going to put the U first and the V second, or the V first and the U second, or I'm going to put 4 digits at the beginning, and so forth. So this is the method. We don't have an automated way of doing it. You have to go and do it manually. And with that, I'm done answering questions. Send them.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say maybe we should wrap up now because it's been 2 hours. But thank you so much, Noseman and Darren, for sort of going through all of this stuff and answering everyone's questions over the 2 hours. I mean, we've still got so many of you here and so many questions, but again, you can send them to training@maxon.net. I don't know, Thanasis, if you want to add your email, if you're happy to have people contact you.
The best way is DM me through Twitter at NosemanGR. Go subscribe to my YouTube channel because I say a lot of stuff. I haven't done a tutorial for nearly a year, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And you'll find me youtube.com/@Noseman. I have another channel which I don't populate with videos called Noseman. That's irrelevant. Athanasios Posantzis. But if you go youtube.com/@Noseman, the proper website comes up, the proper YouTube channel. Subscribe, get your family to subscribe, your pets, your goldfish, your barber. Yeah, everyone.
Tell everyone. Also, as a reminder, this is only week 1 of 4 weeks. So earlier, I know someone was asking, are we going to be showing the workflows in ZBrush as well? Yes, we will during weeks, definitely week 4. We may also be showing some in week 2, but the plan is next Monday to go through some hard surface and like product packaging, specific things. And then with the idea that we then do organic and characters in C4D and ZBrush over the final 2 weeks. And we'll also have Ian back with us and Jonas as well. So yeah, don't worry. This is not a one-off UV session. There will definitely be 3 more at least.
At least. And we may have follow-ups on that.
Yes, I'm
But,
sure we'll be doing
you have to
follow-up.
ask questions. Yeah, you have to ask questions. I see questions about triplanar mapping and all that. But we can touch upon those, although it's not related to UVs per se. It does have to do with texture projection, and we can talk about those things as well. Send your questions and simplify your files. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you on the next one. And nice hanging out.
Yes, always nice to hang out. Yeah, we will see you next Monday, everyone.
Toodaloo.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.